Hello, everyone. This is the first time in the Hipen meeting when I give this presentation, so I'm happy, but also a little bit stressed out. First, I would like to present myself. This is my sign name, Yeva. This is my sign name, and I'm from Lithuania. I am deaf, and I have two deaf children. They're also deaf. And they were born in a deaf family. And this is the fourth generation of deafness in our family. So they're the fourth generation. Uh, you see that today's topic of my presentation, you already see the topic. And I want you today not just listen, but also this might require some not just careful listening, but a broader contextual thinking and as some ideas that I present and that are interested not only to share fact, but also to encourage you deeper reflection and connections. And uh, I would like someone just to turn on the audio. I'm sorry, but we don't see who is has the speaker on. Okay. Mhm. Mhm. Sorry. Side by side. Okay. Ignai, ar jį pasakojo apie savo darbą, kur nedirbo? I'm sorry, and I skipped one more thing that Yeva said that right now she. Okay. Yes, thank you. So I work at two places. The first place that I work is the Vilnius University of Applied Sciences, where I work at the Sign Language Research Center. And the second place is the School for Deaf, uh, uh, where I work as a methodologist, where I prepare materials, I do filming and other things. Also, right now, I work with small children that have a delayed sign language, that have sign language problems. For example, they come from hearing parents families, so they have some sign language disorders. And another thing that I do is right now I work with one uh, hearing girl who has this condition which is called selective mutism. So she cannot speak, but she right now with me we're learning sign language. And my presentation is about whether it's better for a deaf child to be silent or really to have a language so in order to be able to express themselves. Because for deaf children, it's very important sign language. So the topic really require from you to make some connections, to think deeper, not just to, but also to think about the idea that I will present. Sometimes when we notice that the child in a hearing family has some language difficulty, we address the specialists. We go to the specialist and they already have an answer, and we can ask them to fix. But sometimes, but but sometimes with the but
Ta izoliacija kelia
Mhm.
tą.
With the deaf children, for example, because they usually are alone and they're mostly isolated, they don't have access to the sign language. This causes some problems for them and some communicational difficulties. Mhm. I also want to mention that in my presentation, will use only one word, deaf. I will not say hard of deaf or hard of hearing or individuals with sign language, with technologists or hearing aids. No, I will just use one term, deaf. So every time when we have. Mhm. And actually, deaf children are very difficult and they're different, and their degree of hearing loss is also varies. So some of them are bilingual, some of them struggle with national spoken language, but are very fluent in national sign language. Also, some communicate only in spoken national language. Some are multilingual. Some cannot write. Some of them have very weak language skills but create their own communicational systems. So you see, it's a wide spectrum of different disabilities. So the most important thing is the family and the communication in the family. Around 90, from 9 to 95% of deaf children are born in hearing families. But for example, only from 5 to 10% of deaf children are born in deaf families. And these two different families have a different background and different approaches. For example, some children in hearing family, their language level, and they struggle with language because their access to language is later. Also, it's very limited access to the language. So the situations in different families for different children is very different. And sometimes when we see a child's problem with the language, we think that maybe it's some symptoms of autism or some maybe just forget, but we never connect it with language deprivation. But that is the cause. That is the language. That is the reason, and I will explain it later. For example, I would like to to give you an example. For example, hearing families, when the child occurs with some problems, what the parents do? They go to the doctor. They ask them to ask them what is wrong, but there's a delay in their development of my child's language. And all the doctors, they know what are the standards because the hearing people know what are the problems of language delays because a lot of studies were made and they have a lot of information, a lot of literature, and they all know and they know how to connect these problems with specific diagnosis. That's how it works with hearing children. But what about deaf children? About their language, about their language level, when it's lower, when it's higher, when it has problem, who can diagnose it? Are there any researches on that topic? Is there any information, books? Do your countries have this kind of information connected with deaf? I know that in Lithuania we have nothing about that. No literature. So it's all so the problem stays with the family, and there's the family responsibility to address the child needs and to solve this problem because there's no one around who they can ask for help. One more problem is the sometimes we usually say that the problem of some delays is the language because the problem is deafness. And usually all the answers you say, they say it's because of deafness, but that is not like that. And I want you now to think and also find out that, and there are some researches made that these problems are connected with not with deafness, but with language. When we are speaking about language, we always emphasize the importance of thinking because the brain and language are very deeply interconnected. Communication and everything that we collect from the outside, we process that in our brain. We can argue, we can analyze, we can understand, we can express, we can compare things. So if you look at the deaf children, they think visually, they think in sign language. Even when they dream in sign language. And sometimes when a child can express himself, but he can express only by very limited words, one word by word. Is it actually thinking? Is it actually communication? Maybe, but I think it's not enough because we also always emphasize the meaning of spoken language, not sign language. Because spoken language has but when we talk about sign language and spoken language, they're exactly equal because sign language has all the same levels as the hearing, as the spoken language, phonology, morphology, syntax, and semantic, just like spoken languages. And the differences between these two languages is not their value, but their modality. Spoken language is auditory, linear, and arbitrary, while sign language is visual, multi-layered, and iconic. So these are the differences in modality. Every child, regardless of hearing status, must have access to a fully developed language, especially as the first language for their communication, for their possibility to express themselves, to form their identity, to develop thinking. And also, there's a very limited time. And because the researchers say that from 0 to 5 years old, this is the most, and especially this, and sometimes even from 0 to 3 years old, is the most crucial time to access and for the child's development, for the child's brain development. So this is the most crucial period. And when deaf children can express when they have this access to sign language and when they collect the vocabulary, they can actually have this bank of words. So this way, they collect it according to their age. And if you compare the deaf children and hearing children, and if they have equal access to the language, their ability to learn and their ability to collect information and to analyze information is the same at the same age if they have the same access to the language, the natural first language. I would like to share my personal example. When my first child was born and it was deaf, and I was speaking to that child from the very first days, and my mother was asking me, why are you talking? He doesn't understand you. He's too small. Later. But I didn't listen to her, and I was still talking to her. And when she was 8 months old, she showed me her first sign. It was light because I was showing her different lamps. So at the age of 8 months, she showed me her first sign. And she was adding and adding more words. So by the age of 1 year old, she already had 30 words, vocabulary. So we had communication, and her brain was working and she was developing. So with this image, I want to illustrate the importance of first language acquisition. So if the child receives natural and fully accessible language, the successful first language acquisition occurs. So they have these basics, the basic columns for the development of other languages. But so if the deaf child is not given his first language, and it has not the full access to sign language, so the first delays occur, and year by year these delays are getting more and bigger. Uh-huh. And only when they see that this delay is too big, then they start thinking about, okay, maybe now it's time to give him sign language, because but it already has some symptoms of language deprivation, or even the language deprivation syndrome. In some researches, there is this term that is called dinner table syndrome. I will explain more about it. For example, in a hearing family, a deaf child is there. For example, I didn't occur to me that like that, because I was born in a deaf family, and I always was exposed to sign language, and I was always equal. But sometimes I can feel that when a lot of hearing people are around me, and I feel a little bit frustrated because I don't this access to I don't access to information, and I cannot communicate easily, and I feel lonely. Tai dar nepradėjau. Jau sakė. Jau šitą sakinį. Tai aš tai irgi pasakiau. Bet, okay. Gerai. So deaf child among hearing parents is asking, what are you talking about? And parents usually say, oh, later, or they give very brief information, like a summary of what they're talking about, or it's not important. It's not important. So the child feels lost. But the deaf, they also can communicate, but they don't have this access to sign language, and that is why they cannot communicate in this situation. That's what this dinner table syndrome is about. When a child does not have a full or sufficient access to language development may be delayed. So if, for example, if the child from 0 to 5 years old, and they collect and they receive all the information in natural native language on time, they can develop naturally, and they develop. But if it will develop their thinking, and no symptom, no deprivation occur. But I also want to add This deprivation, language deprivation syndrome, is like an epidemic. Uh, and it also is caused by the inclusive education because the children who are deaf, they are alone among hearing people, and this lack of the access to the sign language, natural sign language, is deprived. I want to give you an example about one clinical psychologist whose name was Dr. Neil Glickman, and he worked with mental health, people who have mental health problems, also deaf. And he noticed the percentage of mental health issues among deaf people is much higher than among hearing people. So, what is the reason? Why? The reason is communication and the society, the lack of socialization among deaf. It's not about hearing. It's not about. Uh, it's about understanding, about possibility to express themselves, and it's about the they explode this way because they cannot express themselves naturally with sign language. Another person that I want to present is Dr. Sanjay Gulati. He was a psychiatric who worked with adults people and also with deaf people. So he was analyzing this language deprivation syndrome. And there was language deprivation syndrome was characterized by a variety of different symptoms like language difficulties, difficulties understanding, hmm, difficulties in understanding time and progression. Mhm. And the challenging grasping cause and effect relationships. So I would like also to give my own personal example on this topic. For example, we were arguing about the timing. The people with deprivation syndrome, they couldn't understand the timing. They didn't have this concept of time, and I was trying they all they were trying to understand is only now, but they couldn't understand it yesterday or the day before. It's only now. So this is the caused by language deprivation syndrome. And for example, if the language, they have semantics and grammar, you understand. Like for example, if you hit someone, so you show in sign language, you show the direction of hitting. So for that person, when we were talking and I was trying to explain to him who hit who, that person couldn't understand this word or this semantics, this understanding of direction. Okay. It's uh, the reasons and the consequences that they don't understand the concept of the consequences. If they did something, what is the consequences of what they did? These people usually don't understand that. I have this personal experience when I was working as sign language interpreter at the court, a deaf sign language interpreter, and he was more or less similar my age, and he was sentenced to prison, and the judge said, "Okay, you go to prison for 15 years." And the deaf person was just looking and asking, "Is it okay? Is okay?" He said, "I don't understand. I don't understand. Please, can you explain me what is the deadline? So what is the last day of my imprisoning?" So he couldn't understand the concept of 15 years of this time. Mhm. He couldn't understand the concept of word, for example, that he committed a crime. All he could understand is kill. So not he committed the crime. So these concepts that he had in his mind were very, very limited. Mhm. It's also very important that these people have a very limited fund of information, because they don't have all the deaf people who are deprived from the language. They don't have this understanding. They have all very, very limited understanding that was provided to him, because to them, because they're always alone. They're always excluded from the society, from the information that surrounds them. Mhm. For example, that is the reason why a lot of deaf women are exposed to abortions. They don't care. They don't see that. They don't understand the consequences of what we try to explain them that this is wrong, that she should take care of herself, that she should uh, protect herself, but she doesn't understand these consequences of what she did. And that is why the very high rate of abortions about deaf with language deprivation occur. I already told you about Sanjay Gulati, the researcher, but he also made on YouTube, you can also find a lot of his presentations and his quotes. So this is one of the quotes that I wanted to share with you, because I think it's very important. He worked as a psychologist, psychiatric, and every day families would visit him. Every day he would meet people that have language deprivation. For example, parents who were 60 years old, they would bring a child who is 40 years old and were still existing that child, because he was so dependent on his parents, because of his level of thinking. His communication was very, very limited. So he has very deep problems inside, and these problems were related with the language deprivation. And the same Gulati, he said that in human evolution, language has been essential. So language is very important. Without language, we could die. With language, we can communicate. So language is necessary for our survival and for deaf people to understand. Uh, for example, so the for at first glance, it sounds like deaf people don't have language, but they can survive. but don't they need the language? So yes, they can survive, but if it's real, it's just surviving. So I would like to summarize and tell you something about this. For our uh, so for we all understand language, and to understand language. Mhm. For our brains, it doesn't matter what language we learn and what language we use. Mhm. Uh, mhm. So it doesn't matter what language. The most important thing is the modality of languages. So the form of language, not its substance. It can be vocal, it can be oral, sorry, it can be sign language, but it doesn't matter. The most important thing is language. Mhm. So the development of the language does not solely depend on technology. No. Yes, hearing aids or cochlear implants, for example, may serve as supportive tools, but they don't guarantee language on their own. So the problem is not hearing and deafness. The problem is the language. And when you see children cannot communicate or they communicate word by word, but you see that you need to catch it. You need to catch it on time and address the problem that is already there because you already see some delays. So I don't want to repeat myself, but I want just to tell you one thing. So I'm not arguing what is better, spoken language or sign language. Maybe sometimes it's both spoken language and sign language together. They are not in compete here.